The autumn wind cuts through the empty parking lot like a knife, carrying with it the scent of dying leaves and the promise of winter's approach. Streetlights flicker to life one by one, casting long shadows across the cracked asphalt as the sun disappears behind a wall of gray clouds. It's 7:30 p.m. on October 2, 2009, in the small town of Bridgewater, Michigan, and the world is about to change forever for one young woman who has no idea she's living her final moments of freedom. Sarah Mitchell steps out of the Bridgewater Animal Clinic, her navy blue jacket zipped tight against the evening chill. At 27, she carries herself with the quiet confidence of someone who has found her purpose in life, caring for creatures who cannot speak for themselves. Her auburn hair catches the last rays of daylight as she waves goodbye to Dr. Henderson, her boss of 3 years, who's locking up behind her. "See you Monday, Sarah," he calls out, his voice echoing across the nearly empty lot. "Don't forget we have that new shipment of vaccines coming in." "I'll be here bright and early," she responds, her smile genuine and warm. It's the last time anyone will see that smile alive. Sarah's white 2005 Ford Focus sits alone under a flickering streetlight, license plate GHJ40A21 barely visible in the growing darkness. She fumbles with her keys for a moment, her breath visible in small puffs of vapor as the temperature continues to drop. The weather forecast had called for a storm system moving in from the west, and she can already feel the electricity in the air, that ominous stillness that comes before nature unleashes its fury. As she slides into the driver's seat, Sarah pulls out her phone and dials her mother's number. The call goes to voicemail, as it often does during dinner time at the Mitchell household. These would be her last words. The security camera mounted on the clinic's exterior wall captures her Ford Focus as it pulls out of the lot at exactly 7:45 p.m., headlights cutting through the gathering darkness like twin beacons. The footage shows her car turning left onto Maple Street, following the same route she'd taken home hundreds of times before. But tonight something waits in the shadows, something that will ensure Sarah Mitchell never makes that 15-minute journey home. The storm clouds roll in overhead, thunder rumbling in the distance like the growl of some ancient hungry beast. Before we dive deeper into this deeply unsettling story that would haunt a community for nearly a decade, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications to stay updated with our ongoing investigations into the cases that law enforcement never forgot. Sarah Elizabeth Mitchell wasn't supposed to be a statistic. Born on a crisp February morning in 1982, she was the youngest of 3 children in a family that had already weathered more tragedy than most. When Sarah was just 12 years old, her older brother Daniel had been killed in a car accident on his way home from baseball practice. The loss had nearly destroyed the Mitchell family, but somehow, Sarah's infectious optimism and unwavering kindness had helped hold them together during their darkest days. "She was our little light," her mother, Patricia Mitchell, would later tell investigators. "After we lost Danny, Sarah seemed to understand that life was precious. She never wasted a day being anything but grateful." Growing up in Bridgewater, a town of barely 8,000 residents nestled between rolling farmland and dense Michigan forests, Sarah had always been drawn to animals. While other kids her age were obsessed with social media and shopping, Sarah spent her weekends volunteering at the county animal shelter, nursing sick puppies back to health and finding homes for abandoned cats. Her dream was simple but profound. She wanted to become a veterinarian, to dedicate her life to healing creatures that couldn't heal themselves. After graduating from Bridgewater High School in 2000, Sarah had attended community college while working part-time at various veterinary clinics throughout the county. The work was exactly what she'd imagined: challenging, rewarding, and filled with small miracles that reminded her daily why she'd chosen this path. Henderson at the Bridgewater Animal Clinic had hired her 3 years earlier, impressed not just by her technical skills, but by her natural ability to comfort frightened animals and their worried owners. Sarah had this gift, Dr. Henderson would later recall. Animals that were aggressive with everyone else would calm down the moment she walked into the room. She just had this energy about her, this pure, healing presence. On the evening of October 2, 2009, Sarah's day had unfolded exactly as it always did. She'd assisted Dr. Henderson with 2 surgical procedures, comforted a family whose elderly golden retriever was being put to sleep, and processed the paperwork for 17 new patient visits. At 3 p.m. she'd called her mother to confirm their dinner plans. "I'm making your favorite tonight," Patricia had told her. "Chicken parmesan with those garlic breadsticks you love." "Perfect," Sarah had replied. "I'm starving already. This day has been crazy busy, but good crazy. I'll tell you all about it when I get home." At 6:45 p.m., Sarah had exchanged text messages with her older sister Jennifer, who lived in Detroit with her husband and twin daughters. "Jennifer, you're so lucky you work with animals instead of toddlers. At least puppies don't throw tantrums in grocery stores." Sarah: "Ha! You should see Mr. Whiskers when it's time for his shots. Same energy, bigger claws. Love you, sis." Jennifer: "Love you too. Drive safe tonight. The weather looks nasty." The last message Sarah ever sent was a simple smiley face emoji, transmitted at As Sarah locked up the clinic that evening, she had no way of knowing that someone had been watching her. Someone who had studied her routine, memorized her schedule, and chosen this particular night to set a horrific plan into motion. The storm clouds gathering overhead seemed to sense the evil that was about to unfold, as if nature itself was recoiling from what was to come. Sarah's white Ford Focus disappeared into the darkness, its taillights fading like dying stars against the black canvas of the night. By 8:30 p.m., Patricia Mitchell was pacing the kitchen floor of the family's modest two-story home on Elm Street, her chicken parmesan growing cold on the stove. Sarah was never late without calling, never. It was a rule they'd established after losing Daniel, a small way of ensuring that no family member ever just vanished without explanation. "She probably got held up with an emergency surgery," Patricia's husband Robert suggested, though his voice carried a note of uncertainty that betrayed his growing concern. "You know how she is with the animals. She'd stay all night if one of them needed her." But when Patricia called the clinic at 8:45 p.m., the phone rang unanswered. Dr. Henderson had left at 6 p.m., and the building was locked and empty. At 9 hours under p.m., Patricia dialed Sarah's cell phone. It went straight to voicemail. The sound of her daughter's cheerful voice: "Hi, you've reached Sarah. Leave me a message and I'll get back to you as soon as I can," sent a chill down Patricia's spine that had nothing to do with the October wind, now howling outside their windows. Robert immediately called Jennifer in Detroit, hoping Sarah had perhaps decided to drive there for an impromptu visit, but Jennifer hadn't heard from her sister since their text exchange hours earlier. The growing panic in her father's voice made Jennifer's blood run cold. "Dad, what's wrong? Where's Sarah?" "We don't know, honey. She never came home from work." By 9:30 p.m., both Patricia and Robert were in their car, driving the exact route Sarah would have taken from the clinic to their house. They searched every parking lot, every side street, every place she might have stopped. The storm had arrived in full force now, rain lashing their windshield as they crawled through the darkness, their headlights illuminating nothing but empty road and their growing terror. At 10:15 p.m., Robert Mitchell called the Bridgewater Police Department. "I need to report a missing person," he said, his voice steady despite the fear clawing at his chest. "My daughter never came home from work." Sergeant Mike Rodriguez, a 20-year veteran of the force, took the call with professional calm. In a small town like Bridgewater, missing person reports usually resolve themselves within hours. Someone staying late at a friend's house, a dead cell phone battery, a misunderstanding about plans. But something in Robert Mitchell's voice made Rodriguez reach for his incident report form immediately. The official search began at dawn on October 3rd. Sergeant Rodriguez assembled every available officer, all 6 of them, along with volunteers from the county search and rescue team. K-9 units were brought in from the state police, their German shepherds straining against their leashes as they followed Sarah's scent from the clinic parking lot. The trail led exactly where it should have, down Maple Street, toward Elm Street, following Sarah's normal route home, but somewhere along County Road 47, a lonely stretch of asphalt that curved through a dense section of state forest, the dogs lost the scent completely. They circled the area in confusion, whining and pawing at the ground as if searching for something that should be there but wasn't. At 2 p.m. that afternoon, the search took a devastating turn. Sarah's white Ford Focus was discovered in the parking lot of Miller's General Store, 2 miles from the clinic in the opposite direction of her home. The keys were still in the ignition. Her purse sat on the passenger seat, wallet intact with $43 in cash and all her credit cards. But Sarah was nowhere to be found, and her cell phone was missing. The car showed no signs of struggle. The doors had been unlocked, the windows rolled up, the interior spotless, except for the usual accumulation of a young woman's life: coffee shop receipts, veterinary journals, a pair of sunglasses folded neatly in the center console. It was as if Sarah had simply stepped out of the car and evaporated into the October air. Patricia Mitchell collapsed when she saw her daughter's car surrounded by police tape and evidence technicians. The sound of her wails echoed across the parking lot, a mother's grief so raw and primal that even the hardened investigators had to look away. Robert held his wife as she sobbed, his own tears falling silently onto her graying hair. "She's not dead," Patricia kept repeating, her voice broken and desperate. "She can't be dead. Someone took her, someone has my baby, and we have to find her." But as the hours turned to days, and the days turned to weeks, the horrible possibility that Sarah Mitchell might never come home began to settle over Bridgewater, like a suffocating fog. The community mobilized with the fierce determination of people who understand that tragedy could strike any family. Flyers featuring Sarah's smiling face appeared on every telephone pole, in every shop window, on every church bulletin board. Her photograph stared out from milk cartons and pizza boxes, her bright eyes and warm smile a constant reminder that one of their own was missing. Jennifer Mitchell quit her job in Detroit and moved back to Bridgewater to coordinate the search efforts. She established a command center in the basement of the Methodist Church, where volunteers answered phones, organized search parties, and distributed missing person flyers to neighboring counties. The response was overwhelming. Hundreds of people who had never met Sarah Mitchell spent their weekends combing through forests and farm fields, driven by nothing more than the basic human need to help. But as October faded into November, and November surrendered to December, the leads began to dry up. Every tip was investigated, every possible sighting checked and rechecked. A gas station attendant thought he'd seen Sarah at a rest stop near the Indiana border. It was a college student from Western Michigan University. A trucker reported giving a ride to a young woman matching Sarah's description outside Toledo. Security cameras proved it was someone else entirely. The investigation consumed Sergeant Rodriguez's every waking moment. He interviewed Sarah's co-workers, her classmates, her professors, even casual acquaintances from high school. He examined her computer, her phone records, her bank statements, searching for any clue that might explain why someone would want to harm such a universally beloved young woman. But Sarah Mitchell had no enemies, no secret relationships, no hidden debts or dangerous association. She was exactly what she appeared to be, a kind, hard-working young woman whose only crime was being in the wrong place at the wrong time. By spring of 2010, the active search for Sarah Mitchell had quietly wound down. The volunteers went back to their regular lives, the command center in the church basement was dismantled, and the flyers began to fade and peel from their posts around town. Officially, the case remained open and active, but with no new leads and no evidence pointing toward any particular suspect, there was little the police could do except wait and hope. For the Mitchell family, waiting became a special kind of torture. Every phone call might be the call they'd been praying for. Every knock on the door could bring news of their daughter's fate. They attended grief counseling sessions at the urging of their pastor. But how do you grieve someone who might still be alive? How do you move forward when moving forward feels like abandonment? Robert threw himself into his work at the county road department, volunteering for every overtime shift available. Physical exhaustion was the only thing that allowed him to sleep at night without dreaming of his missing daughter. His coworkers learned not to mention Sarah's name around him. The pain in his eyes was too difficult to witness. Jennifer struggled to maintain her marriage and care for her twin daughters while dealing with her own grief and guilt. She tortured herself with what-if scenarios. What if she had driven down to Bridgewater that evening for an impromptu visit? What if she had insisted Sarah move to Detroit, where it was safer? What if she had called the police sooner when Sarah didn't answer her phone? The town of Bridgewater learned to live with the ghost of Sarah Mitchell. Parents held their children a little tighter. Young women were more careful about walking alone after dark. The innocence that small towns pride themselves on had been shattered, replaced by the terrible knowledge that evil could strike anywhere, anytime, without warning or reason. Every October 2nd, the Methodist Church held a memorial service for Sarah. The turnout remained strong for the first few years, but gradually dwindled as new tragedies claimed the community's attention and Sarah's disappearance faded from immediate memory. Only the Mitchell family and a handful of Sarah's closest friends continued to attend, their numbers growing smaller each year like a slowly dying flame. Dr. Henderson never hired another full-time assistant. He claimed he didn't need the help, but everyone knew the truth. No one could replace Sarah Mitchell, and he couldn't bear to watch someone else perform the duties that had been hers. The examination room where she used to comfort frightened animals felt hollow and cold, a constant reminder of the light that had been extinguished. By 2015, even the most optimistic observers had given up hope that Sarah would ever be found alive. The case had gone cold in every sense of the word, relegated to a filing cabinet in the basement of the police station, where it gathered dust alongside other unsolved mysteries. For the Mitchell family, acceptance of this reality felt like a betrayal of their daughter's memory, but they were exhausted from 6 years of hope and heartbreak. Then, in March of 2017, everything changed. Detective Chen received a call from the Michigan State Police Crime Laboratory that would reignite the investigation and finally provide answers to questions that had haunted Bridgewater for nearly 8 years. Advances in DNA analysis technology had made it possible to extract usable genetic profiles from evidence samples that had previously yielded no results. A microscopic skin cell found under the driver's side door handle of Sarah's car, a sample so small it had been deemed unusable in 2009, had finally given up its secrets. "We have a profile," the lab technician told Chen over the phone. "It's a complete male DNA sequence, and it doesn't match anyone in our immediate databases. But we can run it through the genealogy sites now if you want to go that route." Genetic genealogy was revolutionizing cold case investigations across the country. By comparing crime scene DNA to genetic profiles voluntarily submitted to ancestry websites, investigators could identify suspects through their family connections, even if the perpetrator himself had never submitted a sample. It was the same technique that had finally caught the Golden State Killer in California, and Chen was eager to apply it to Sarah Mitchell's case. The process took months. Genealogists worked backwards through family trees, following genetic breadcrumbs that led from distant cousins to closer relatives to potential suspects. In September of 2017, they finally had a name: Marcus Webb, a 38-year-old mechanic who lived just 4 miles from where Sarah's car had been found. Webb had never been on law enforcement's radar during the original investigation. He had no criminal record, no history of violence, no apparent connection to Sarah Mitchell or her family. But when Detective Chen began digging into his background, a disturbing picture began to emerge. In 2009, Webb had worked the night shift at Johnson's Auto Repair, a small garage located on County Road 47, the same stretch of highway where the K-9 units had lost Sarah's scent. The garage sat in an isolated area surrounded by dense forest, the perfect place to commit a crime without witnesses. Webb's time card showed that he had left work early on October 2, 2009, claiming he felt sick. No one had questioned his absence at the time. More troubling still were the inconsistencies in Webb's statements to police during the original investigation. He had been interviewed along with dozens of other local residents, but his account of his whereabouts that night had changed multiple times. Initially, he claimed to have been home alone watching television. Later, he said he had been visiting his mother in a neighboring town. When pressed for details, he became evasive and hostile, prompting investigators to make a note in his file about his uncooperative attitude. But without any physical evidence linking him to Sarah's disappearance, Webb had been cleared and forgotten. Now, 8 years later, science had finally caught up with him. Detective Chen spent weeks building her case before moving to arrest Webb. She conducted surveillance, interviewed his current and former coworkers, and obtained search warrants for his property and vehicle. What she discovered would shock even seasoned investigators who thought they had seen everything. Hidden in Webb's basement workshop, behind a false wall that had been carefully constructed to look like part of the foundation, Chen found a shrine dedicated to Sarah Mitchell. Newspaper clippings about her disappearance covered the walls, along with photographs that had clearly been taken without Sarah's knowledge, images of her leaving work, pumping gas, grocery shopping. Webb had been stalking Sarah for months before her disappearance, documenting her every move with the obsessive attention of a predator studying his prey. Most damning of all was Sarah's missing cell phone, still containing the last text message she had sent to her sister. Webb had kept it all these years, a trophy of his crime, and a reminder of the power he had wielded over an innocent young woman's life. On the morning of October 15, 2017, just 13 days after the 8th anniversary of Sarah's disappearance, Detective Chen and a team of state police officers surrounded Marcus Webb's modest ranch house on the outskirts of Bridgewater. Neighbors watched in stunned silence as the man they had known for years as a quiet, unremarkable mechanic was led away in handcuffs. Webb's arrest sent shockwaves through the community. Parents who had trusted him to repair their family cars suddenly wondered if their children had ever been safe around him. His co-workers at the auto repair shop struggled to reconcile the mild-mannered man they thought they knew with the monster he had apparently been all along. He was just so normal, one neighbor told reporters. He mowed his lawn every Saturday, waved when you drove by, never caused any trouble. You'd never think someone like that could do something so horrible. But it was Webb's confession, delivered in a cold, matter-of-fact tone during his interrogation, that finally provided the answers the Mitchell family had been seeking for 8 agonizing years. Webb admitted to following Sarah from the veterinary clinic on the night of October 2, 2009. He had been watching her for months, learning her routine, waiting for the perfect opportunity to act on the violent fantasies that had consumed his thoughts. When he saw her leaving work alone that stormy evening, he knew the time had come. He had forced her off the road near the auto repair shop where he worked, using his mechanical knowledge to disable her car in a way that would look like engine trouble. When Sarah got out to examine the problem, Webb overpowered her and forced her into his own vehicle. He drove her to a remote location deep in the state forest, where he killed her and buried her body in a shallow grave. Webb led investigators to Sarah's remains on a gray November morning, the trees bare and skeletal against the overcast sky. After 8 years, there wasn't much left, just bones and scraps of navy blue fabric that matched the jacket she had been wearing on her final night. But it was enough to bring Sarah Mitchell home at last. The discovery of Sarah's body brought both relief and renewed anguish to her family. Patricia Mitchell collapsed at the news, her legs simply giving out as 8 years of suppressed grief finally erupted in a torrent of tears. Robert held his wife as she screamed, the sound echoing through their house like the wail of a wounded animal. But there was also a sense of completion, a feeling that Sarah could finally rest in peace. The not knowing had been its own special kind of hell, leaving the family suspended between hope and despair, with no way to move forward. Now at least, they could lay their daughter to rest with dignity and begin the long process of healing. Jennifer Mitchell, now a mother of teenage twins who had never met their aunt, spoke for the family at a press conference the day after Sarah's remains were found. "We want to thank Detective Chen and all the investigators who never gave up on Sarah," she said, her voice steady despite her tears. "We also want to thank the community of Bridgewater for keeping our sister's memory alive all these years. Sarah was taken from us by a monster, but she was surrounded by love even in death. That means everything to our family." Marcus Webb's trial began on a cold February morning in 2018, merely 9 years after he had stolen Sarah Mitchell's life. The courtroom was packed with Sarah's family and friends, many of whom had waited years for this moment of justice. Webb sat at the defendant's table in an orange jumpsuit, his head down, refusing to make eye contact with the people whose lives he had destroyed. The evidence against him was overwhelming. DNA proof, the cell phone trophy, the shrine in his basement, his detailed confession, any one of these elements would have been enough to convict him. Together they painted a picture of a cold-blooded killer who had planned and executed Sarah's murder with chilling premeditation. Sarah's former co-workers testified about her kindness and dedication, Dr. Henderson, now in his 70s and fighting back tears, described Sarah as the best employee he had ever had, a young woman who treated every animal as if it were her own beloved pet. Her college professors spoke of her academic achievements and her dream of becoming a veterinarian. The prosecution's case was methodical and devastating. They walked the jury through Webb's months of stalking, his carefully planned attack, and his efforts to cover up his crime. They showed photographs of the shrine, played recordings of his confession, and presented the DNA evidence that had finally brought him to justice. Webb's defense attorney, a court-appointed lawyer who clearly recognized the hopelessness of his client's situation, made only a half-hearted attempt to argue for leniency. There was no question of Webb's guilt. The evidence was too overwhelming. Patricia Mitchell was the final witness for the prosecution. She walked slowly to the witness stand, her husband's hand in hers, and faced the man who had murdered her daughter. "You took everything from us," she said, her voice barely above a whisper but carrying clearly through the silent courtroom. "You took Sarah's future, her dreams, her chance to help the animals she loved so much. You took our family's peace and joy. You took a light from this world that can never be replaced." She paused, gathering strength for her final words. "But you didn't win, Marcus Webb. Sarah's love lives on in everyone who knew her. Her kindness inspired others to be kind. Her memory has brought this community together in ways you'll never understand. You may have taken her life, but you could never take her spirit. That belongs to us, and you can't touch it." The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours before returning with their verdict: guilty on all counts. Webb was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, ensuring that he would never again have the opportunity to harm another innocent person. As the judge read the sentence, Webb finally looked up, his eyes meeting those of the Mitchell family for the first time since his arrest. There was no remorse in his expression, no recognition of the pain he had caused. He was led away in shackles, disappearing into the prison system where he would spend the remainder of his days. Sarah Elizabeth Mitchell was laid to rest on a sunny March morning in 2018, surrounded by hundreds of people who had loved her, searched for her, and never forgotten her. The service was held at the Methodist church where her family had held vigil for so many years, and the sanctuary overflowed with mourners who had come to say goodbye to a young woman whose life had touched theirs in profound ways. Dr. Henderson delivered one of the eulogies, his voice breaking as he described Sarah's gift with animals and her unwavering compassion for all living creatures. Jennifer spoke about her sister's dreams and the light she had brought to their family. Even Sergeant Rodriguez, long retired but still haunted by the case he couldn't solve, attended the service to pay his respects to the young woman whose disappearance had consumed his final years on the force. Sarah was buried in Bridgewater Cemetery, under a spreading oak tree that would provide shade in summer and shelter for the birds she had loved so much. Her headstone bore a simple inscription: Sarah Elizabeth Mitchell, beloved daughter, sister, and friend. Her kindness lives on. Detective Chen, who had brought Sarah's killer to justice, was promoted to sergeant and became a specialist in cold case investigations. She kept a photograph of Sarah on her desk, as a reminder that every case represented a real person whose life had been stolen, a family torn apart by violence and uncertainty. "Sarah's case taught me that we can never give up," Chen reflected years later. "Technology keeps advancing, new techniques keep developing, and families keep hoping. Sometimes justice takes 8 years to arrive, but it can still arrive. That's what we owe to the victims and their families, the promise that we'll never stop trying." The Mitchell family established a scholarship fund in Sarah's name, providing financial assistance to students pursuing careers in veterinary medicine. Patricia and Robert Mitchell, now in their 70s, still live in the same house on Elm Street, where they waited so many nights for their daughter to come home. Sarah's bedroom has been converted into a memorial room filled with photographs and mementos, but also with letters from scholarship recipients and updates from animal shelters that have benefited from their daughter's legacy. Sarah's death was senseless and horrible, Patricia reflected on the 10th anniversary of her daughter's disappearance. But if her story helps solve other cold cases, if it gives hope to other families who are still waiting for answers, then maybe some good can come from our tragedy. Sarah would want her story to help others. That's just who she was. The town of Bridgewater has healed, as small towns do, but it has not forgotten. Every October 2nd, candles are still lit at the Methodist Church. Sarah's photograph still hangs in the animal clinic where she worked, and Dr. Henderson still talks about her with visitors, as if she had just stepped out for lunch and might return at any moment. Marcus Webb remains in prison, a forgotten man whose name is mentioned only when necessary in legal proceedings. He has never expressed remorse for his actions, never acknowledged the pain he caused, never offered any explanation for why he chose to destroy so many lives. He exists now as nothing more than a cautionary tale about the evil that can lurk behind the most ordinary facades. But Sarah Mitchell's story is about more than the monster who killed her. It's about the power of love to endure even the worst tragedy, about communities that come together in times of crisis, about investigators who refuse to give up on victims who can no longer speak for themselves. It's about the advancement of science in service of justice, and the hope that technology will continue to evolve until no case remains forever cold. Most importantly, it's about a young woman whose kindness and compassion inspired everyone who knew her, whose dreams of healing animals reflected a soul that wanted nothing more than to make the world a better place. Sarah Mitchell's life was cut short by violence, but her legacy lives on in every act of kindness performed in her memory, every animal saved by the shelters she supported, every cold case solved by the techniques that finally brought her justice. The autumn wind still blows through Bridgewater on October evenings, rustling the leaves and carrying with it the promise of winter's approach. But now, when the streetlights flicker on and cast their long shadows across empty parking lots, the town rests a little easier knowing that justice was served, that a family finally found peace, and that a young woman's memory will never be forgotten. Sarah Mitchell is home at last. Her story complete, her legacy eternal.